the best contracts are the ones you never get off the shelf.
Yeah.
That if you have something that, if you have a conflict, you call the other party and you work it out.
Yeah.
And you never have to pull that contract down and read it. And those are the kind of deals that I like. I'm a little different than you, and I think the yin and yang that we have is probably helped us in a lot of occasions.
Yeah.
That I'm more of a, need to take a step back and let's analyze, let's think about this, let's pray about this. And you're more of a, let's dive right in. We got to do this now.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes you're right, sometimes I'm right, but for the most part, our thought processes end up meshing well.
My name's Max Gagliardi, and this is Always Be Building. If you're watching this video, take a moment, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, or you can follow me on your favorite podcast app. Hope you enjoy the show. Mark, finally twisted your arm hard enough to get you to come on.
It's taken forever, but I hate looking at myself, so that's why.
We all hate looking at ourselves. What I found is that in a couple of years, you look back and be like, I look good. 2 years ago.
Yeah. I'm beyond that. I'm too old for that.
You're not. I look back at even like 6 months ago. I'm like, why do I look younger than I did now? I think this business is aging us. Gas prices dropping
it can do
70% in the span of a couple months. I'm glad you finally did it. It's fun. It's good we've been partners now for how long?
2014. So going on 9 years.
9 years. I have to say business partners. People are always like, you say partner, is he your, what do you mean? My wife's always like, you got to say business partner, because you always are saying Mark's your partner, and people are confused with it. But it's been good.
That's your generation. Mine doesn't get confused.
Yeah, they don't get confused with it. It's been good. We've had a lot of good times, ups and downs. I want to tell some of the story, but I think for people listening, your resume is just like, it's awesome. And I joke around about riding your coattails when we started this thing, putting together like a teaser about how to pitch people on using our services. And it was just like, let's just get Mark's resume and we'll put it into a PowerPoint.
I feel like I'm riding your coattails now. So you've come a long way, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what we put together. It's really cool.
I think we've done a good job in terms of the industry during the stretch that we've been in. It's not easy all the time.
No.
And I think it speaks to just like trying to add value. And if we can do that, I think we've done it for people. And so that kind of snowballs over time. But
it's interesting. I was talking to Chris Sorrells yesterday. We were on the phone with a client, excuse me, and we got off the phone and he goes, I really like helping people.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Right.
And that's what really gets me out of bed every day is, man, I get to go up here and help people out. And I get juiced when I get a deal done, when I accomplish a deal and get it done and everybody's happy. And it's really not, the money's just secondary to me.
We get to do fun things. Like the stuff we're working on is fun. There's times when I feel like I get stressed, and then there's other times like when we go through a day and we're going from call to call, or maybe we have a team meeting and we're talking about some of the stuff we're building here internally. And like a moment will hit me and I'm like, this is a dream to be able to just do the things that we get to work on. We get the maps out, start looking at, I just think back to like early in my career and how excited I was to just be able to negotiate a contract or, everybody stand around a map and point fingers at it and talk about a project and to look at a wide variety of stuff. But we do like a lot of different things. We'll be talking about negotiating a deal, then maybe like an M&A transaction, or maybe it's, whatever it may be, some back office thing that may not be as exciting, but it's a complicated problem we're trying to solve. But how have you've fallen into this role in commercial? I say fallen into it. You've been in it for a long time now, probably in the commercial function for at least 20 something years.
Yeah. I literally did fall into it. I was graduated from OU, looking for a job. I'd worked as a landman in the summers, in college, and I was making $100 a day. And I thought, man, how can I make more money than that.
Yeah.
So I quit school. And I was working full-time as a landman, making $100 a day. I'll never forget this. I was in Ardmore, Oklahoma. I love Ardmore.
Yeah.
Ardmore's a great town.
Right.
But I was checking records, buying leases down there. And it was a Friday morning. And I'd been in the bar with all these other landmen at the Holiday Inn bar the night before. And I walk into the courthouse and I start looking around, and I'd been talking to that guy over there, and he's been divorced twice, been a landman all his life. Look at this guy over here, and he's going through a divorce, mid-50s, landman. And I just thought, man, I don't want to be one of those guys.
Yeah.
Not that being a field landman's a bad thing, but
it's a grind.
It's a grind, and you're out of town all the time, and you're eating fast food all the time, and and I just thought, I got to go back to college. I got to go back and finish my degree. So that's what I did. And then when I got out of college, I got a job at Texas Oil and Gas as a field landman again, but there was a promise that, or maybe not a promise, but a chance that I could move in-house as a landman. So I took that job. And it was interesting because they hired 4 of us. And they said, we're only going to be able to keep 2 of you. So the best 2 are going to get full-time jobs. The other 2 we're going to have to, let go. We got 1 month. So it was like a contest. And I worked like a sled dog that whole time, just pulling all-nighters, right now, typing up on my typewriter ownership reports and buying leases and all that kind of stuff. So the month goes by, and it turns out that one guy was the best friend of the assistant land manager. So he got a job. The other guy was the commanding officer in the Army Reserve for the land manager.
Yeah.
So I never had a chance.
Right.
So they let me and another guy go. And a month later, they called me back and said, hey, we need you. Come on back. I didn't get discouraged. I didn't yell and scream when they let me go. I said, okay, I understand. And they called me back. and so I got a job, worked as a field landman for a while, got an in-house position, handling some western Oklahoma counties, and another bust hit the industry. So what happened at that point is they said, we need somebody to do curative work, which was just curing title, essentially, helping cure title. And I volunteered, and that probably saved my job because after that, they let people go. Worked my way back up, and then another bust hits. This is in a matter of 5 years, it was just an up and down.
Time stamp at this roughly.
This was in the early to mid 80s.
Okay.
And they said, we need somebody to go down to Delhi Gas Pipeline and crunch take-or-pay numbers. And again, raised my hand, volunteered. And I've been on the midstream side of the business, either on the pipeline side or the producer side ever since. So 1984 was when that happened. And it's been, I've seen a lot in those years, but I wouldn't change it for a thing.
It seems like I was very fortunate as well to just kind of drop into this role. I've said it a bunch, and it's like there's only so many things you can do in this industry as a business person. You've got, land work. You can be finance or accounting, kind of your traditional, office type roles. And a lot of the stuff in this business is science and engineering, or that's a lot of the leaders in this business. In different companies, it's different. And for example, Aubrey wasn't a scientist or an engineer, but a lot of companies, that's kind of like the primary roles. And so if you're a business person, where can you slot in? And this has just always been like the most exciting aspect of the business because it's making the money, but it's not only just making the money, it's also we get to touch a bunch of different things.
Yeah. Well, the way I kind of describe it is we're the cash register. We're working the retail floor at the clothing store.
Right.
And we're doing the deal. We're not making the sausage, but we're selling the sausage.
Right.
And you see a lot of different things. You get to interact with a lot of different people, and that's what I really enjoy about the business.
When you got into the Delhi role, talk about the learning curve, what you started doing, and then how you got up that learning curve over the years.
I was crunching take or pay numbers initially, and it was all on a 10 key, writing everything down in a ledger.
Yeah.
And I had a supervisor, Tad Goki was his name, really awesome guy. He kind of took me under his wing. He said, okay, you crunch these numbers, come with me to help negotiate out of these deals, these take or pay deals that Delhi had.
Yeah.
So I just followed him around, was kind of a fly on the wall, and learned a lot from him on how to, negotiate different aspects of a contract, different clauses in a contract, how to give and take, essentially, in a contract. Give one thing, take another in the contract. So I learned a lot from him. He was great to me. I didn't know a thing about the pipeline business when he kind of took me under his wing. So I owe a lot to him for that. So, for sure. And then from there, I got an area and became a supply rep at Delhi and worked there for about 6 years, I guess, at Delhi. Got an opportunity to go to a small gatherer processor. Had some assets in Oklahoma and Logan County, which are now owned by DCP. But we had a couple of processing plants and worked those assets. It was Finley Energy. It was a British company and Scottish, actually, and worked for them for 5 years and then went back to Delhi. It's an interesting kind of path that I've taken through.
Why did you leave? Did you just want something new? Tired of it?
Why did I leave Finley Energy, or
why did you leave Delhi?
It was a paycheck, a bigger paycheck,
right.
And it was an opportunity to kind of be in a managerial type role.
Right.
So that's why I took it.
And then you went back, and then how long were you back?
I was back there for probably, it was another 5 years, Delhi. And went to work after that, I got hired at JMA Energy to get on the producer side of the business now. So I hopped the fence, went on the producer side, and really, really enjoyed that because I knew the pipeline side, and I knew what they liked and what they didn't like.
Right.
And was able to use that on the producer side. So it was an interesting transition, but it was one that I've never looked back. I really have had opportunities to go back to the midstream side of the business. I've had opportunities to get strictly in the trading side of the business, and I've chosen to just stay on the producer side.
Yeah. And then from JMA, is that where you went to Chesapeake after that?
From JMA, I went to Chesapeake 1999, and I tell people when I got there, we had 10 rigs running, and I thought, how are we going to be busier than this? 10 rigs, wow. And my job was to make sure that every one of those wells got connected to a gathering system, and I negotiated the gathering deals. Got hired as manager of gas sales is what it was called. It was more of a commercial role.
Yeah.
But did that for several years.
We're going to jump into Chesapeake in a second, but I think you glossed over, you kind of went into some of the ups and downs of getting let go, going through those downturns. But I know there was a period where you were doing like mud sales and stuff like that. Talk about some of the lows, because I think it seems like your career had a very steep trajectory in terms of all the cool stuff you got to do in the resume and everything that we talked about earlier. But there were some times when things were a struggle.
That, but yeah. At Finley Energy, we went through a period where drilling had fallen off. The decline on the system was pretty steep. We decided to sell the assets, and they let some people go. They came to me and said, "Hey, we'll give you some stay pay. Help us sell these assets." So I did that. It took about a year to get that done. And at the time, again, this was in a downturn in the industry. I couldn't it was difficult to find a job in Oklahoma City at the time.
Right.
I didn't want to move. I had a family, had 3 kids. So I knew a guy in the mud sales business, drilling fluids, named Dan Jordan. I went to work for him for a year, and it was all pretty much all commission.
Yeah.
And it was a grind because there wasn't a lot of drilling going on, and so times were really tough. My wife had to go back to work at that point in time.
Yeah.
And it was a tough time. So
this industry, it seems like it's hard for people to stick in it. There's a lot of people that I know that are really talented people that I knew maybe earlier in my career, specifically like in what we do, midstream or commercial stuff. And they were like riding high. They went and either started a company or were up at a very high position, like a VP level. And like a bunch of those people I know have just left the industry completely since 2014 with all these downturns.
Yeah. And, for me, once it got in my blood, I couldn't leave it. But I understand where they're coming, because it can break your heart. This business can break your heart.
Right.
It can reward you greatly as well. But I just wanted to stay in the industry somehow, and that was a way to do it. It didn't fit me. That mud sales did not fit me. Dan Jordan will tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
We parted ways amicably, and I got a job. That's when I went to work for JMA at that point.
Gotcha. I think you and I are similar in a lot of ways. Personality-wise, we're different. We have some yin and yang, and we'll talk about it later. I think some of the good things about having a good partner, that you have strengths and weaknesses, that you play off of each other. But I think we're similar in a lot of ways too. I think we're both pretty passionate people. I think we both have good ethics and moral compasses, which is important in a partnership. But talk about when you were younger and, you grew up wrestling. And I think that I've always credited it. I grew up wrestling too. I didn't, when I got into high school, I didn't take it as seriously as you did at that point, but I started when I was little, and I credit a lot of that for my ability to kind of work hard, persevere when things are tough. But like, did that shape you at all to help you get through some of these times when you were older?
Absolutely. I mean, wrestling, being an individual sport like it is, it tests your ability to follow through, to persevere.
Right.
You have to have, some self-discipline, a lot of self-discipline, because you gotta watch your weight, you gotta watch, you gotta work hard. And what I found was, if I wasn't that talented of a wrestler, I had to outwork everybody,
right,
to be successful. And that's what I did. I mean, I was running probably 5 miles a day, and that was 7 days a week, just so I could make weight, and nobody was going to beat me in the third period, because
right.
I out-conditioned everybody. So, I was probably a foot taller than everybody I wrestled as well. So that I was able to use my leverage
sure.
to be successful. But the main thing about wrestling is the self-discipline you have to be successful.
Isn't that kind of like an analogy for life in a lot of ways? It's like everybody has deficiencies or strengths and weaknesses. And so it's like you focus on what you can control and you work at that. And you're kind of, especially in like an entrepreneurship role, you're sort of competing with yourself. Like, yes, we have competitors. Yes, there's forces that we can't control. But ultimately, it's kind of like be the best version of you and do what you know you can do and do it the best you can. And I think kids these days, I don't want to sound like an old person, kids these days, maybe that's lost sometimes, not with every kid, obviously, but being in something in an environment like that, it has to set you up for at least that mindset, right, as you go out through the rest of the challenges, because there's ups and downs in everything.
Yeah, you almost have to turn off the outside influences.
Right.
And just focus on getting the job done. And that's what kind of wrestling will teach you. And this business is a lot like that as well, because the outside influences are, pricing and regulatory and all these things that are influencing the overall industry, but you've got a job to do. and you got to focus on that job and focus getting that job done. And so that's really, really kind of helped me get through some of these tough times like we're going through now. I mean, pricing is horrible, but the thing I can tell everybody about this business is the only thing that's consistent about the oil and gas business is inconsistency.
Right.
One thing we're sure of is things are going to change.
Right.
And it goes on forever. It's been like that since I've been in this business, and it's not going to change. So you just can't get discouraged when a lot of these outside influences, pricing, regulatory, political influences, all these things come into play, but they always change.
No, it's good. And it's true. So when you moved over to Chesapeake, I guess you didn't know at the time, couldn't have known that you were basically strapping yourself to a rocket, essentially. Like you had hitched yourself a ride on a rocket effectively.
Had no idea. It was funny because when I was probably there for about, maybe a month, and I was working through lunch one day, and anybody that's worked at Chesapeake knows this. Every kitchen in Chesapeake had boxes of saltine crackers and jars of peanut butter and water bottles. And so that was going to be my lunch. So I went in to the kitchen. We were in a small little building over in Three Chop. It's called Three Chop. It's where the campus is now. And I made myself a plate of peanut butter crackers. I had a water bottle, and I'm walking through the trade room. And nobody was there because it was lunchtime. In the trade room had TVs everywhere. Well, one of the TVs had a Jerry Springer show on.
Rest in peace, Jerry. We talked about it before the episode that we wanted to tell the story because the news of his passing.
Jerry
this week.
just passed away. But anyway, I'm standing there for about 15, 20 seconds watching Jerry Springer. Had a cracker in my mouth, and Aubrey, who I'd never seen walk through our building in the month I was there, walks in by himself, looks at me, looks up at the TV, walks over to the TV, hits the off button, turns around and walks through the building and out the building. And I thought, I've been here a month. I'm probably going to get let go now because he caught me watching Jerry Springer.
He had a way of making you feel really big sometimes if he was, engaged in praising you. But if you ever felt like he was disappointed, you're like, he could make you feel small too.
Yeah. He had a way of figuring out what motivated everybody. He had a way of figuring out how he could treat each person in the company. And he was so good at that, and he treated everybody with respect. But if you needed to be knocked down a notch, he could do that as well.
Yeah.
But he did it in a positive way, typically.
Right. So you got there, you didn't know that it was going to be what it was going to be. I mean, like, what was explain to me, because I didn't know Chesapeake in the late 90s because I was young at that point, and I still lived in Tulsa. But what was the vibe when you went over there? Did it feel like it had a ton of growth potential? Was it? I mean, just talk about how things were there when you went over. Then we'll talk about how things changed.
Gas prices at the time I went over there were probably about $1, and I thought, what am I doing going over to Chesapeake? They had just come out of a difficult time as well, but it was a great opportunity because I thought if prices come back around, this place could take off, and be really successful. And in fact, in my 5-year anniversary, every year Aubrey would take the people that had been there for 5 years and 10 years and 15 years and have a little get together with them. And he was in there one day, and we were in there one day, and he said, "Okay, who started here in 1999? And about, 10 people raised their hand. And he goes, "What were you thinking?" It was a tough time. 1999 was a tough time in the business. But it wasn't long after that prices started coming back, and I got to do things at Chesapeake that I never dreamed I'd get to do. And I give Aubrey a lot of credit for that because he took us on a ride that was, you just had to hold on and do your best. And that's what we did.
When you got there, how many rigs were they running?
10.
10. That's still a lot of rigs. I mean, by any standards. I don't know back then if that was as big of a deal.
Yeah, and at one point in time, we had 100, I think it was 162 rigs running.
Yeah, 165, something like that.
Something like that. And it was...
And those are horizontal rigs too, most of them.
A lot of them, yeah. Most of them. But the other thing that we were able to do at Chesapeake was hire good people.
Sure.
And what was interesting is the type A personalities always seemed to thrive there. And because they saw the job they had to do and they focused on getting that job done and not what the other guy was doing. And, you know, the teamwork there was pretty phenomenal.
What were the step changes in the company? Where were the times when you said, okay, things are really, it went from, you know, hey, the prices came back, we're doing a little better, to the shale revolution happening? Was it like the Barnett? What were the big moments kind of in the early days that you felt like, man, this is a sea change in where we're going?
Yeah, horizontal drilling kind of came into play while I was there. And the jury was kind of out on it. It was still new technology and it was expensive and not many people were doing it. And frankly, I was one of those guys going, I don't know about this horizontal drilling thing. But we got involved in the Barnett Shale initially, and it turned out to be the real deal. And it wasn't long after that we got into the Haynesville. And that was an amazing opportunity to be able to see the Haynesville go from start to where it is today.
Yeah,
pretty amazing. And the same with the Marcellus and the Utica and even the Fayetteville Shale. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be drilling horizontal wells in Arkansas?
All right.
We started in Arkansas, and there weren't enough service companies out there. So Aubrey was even thinking about building man cams out there to house people to come in and drill at the pace he wanted to drill at. So
what time frame was that with Barnett? Was that like mid 2000s, probably late 2000s?
Yeah, it was probably 2004. I'm guessing 3, 4, something like that.
And you talk about hiring good people and the opportunities that came from that, but like a guy like Carlos, who I worked for back then, he reported to you. He came in and he was working on stuff like right during that heyday. And it wasn't just him, Jake Fowler, a bunch of other guys in your group. Just the experience during that time to get to be able to be a part of some of that stuff was just crazy.
Yeah. I think the thing that Aubrey recognized is that, let the cream rise to the top. Let people do their jobs and see which ones are really good at it, which ones are just average at it. And that's what we did in Semi, which is Chesapeake Energy Marketing, Inc., is where we worked. And at Semi, we'd hire people, and it was the cream rose to the top there. And guys like Carlos, Jake, these young guys would come in, and we would just, I like to let people shine. And I'd say, okay, come on, Carlos, we're going to go to a meeting with Aubrey. And he would just, what? Yeah, this is your area. This is your deal.
Yeah.
You explain it. If you saw into it or not, I'll jump in and help you out. And so I would kind of push people to the front and let them, explain their deals and fight for their deals. And I think that's why you'll see a lot of guys that we worked with that are very successful now, is because they're not intimidated by, that kind of situation.
I mean, we know, just off the top of my head, I could probably name at least 10 people that worked with us during the stretch at Chesapeake that have gone on to create startups that have sold or created $1 billion type startups.
Yeah.
And they're not making news they're not as flashy as like these tech companies, or they're not on the cover of Forbes, but these people are just as much starting. I mean, think about it. We know a couple of guys right now recently that are about to sell their company for billions of dollars, and that we worked with back in the day. And that's pretty incredible that like that much leadership and entrepreneurship came from like that one place. I mean, there's got to be something to be said for that.
Yeah. And it's not just in the marketing department either. It's
across the board.
All across the old Chesapeake employees, there's, like you say, billions of dollars of value has been created by those guys.
And guys like Sky, I mean, his journey's been incredible, and very, very fortunate to work with him at Ancova with, Felix and his other iterations of his businesses. But a guy like Sky was a leader at Chesapeake. A guy like Carlos was a leader at Chesapeake. It was the people that, like you said, the cream that was rising to the top. It didn't take a rocket scientist to look around and point to who was really the all-star people at the company. And they proved it not only then, but a lot of those people like that I just mentioned, they've gone on to do incredible things in the industry afterwards. So it was almost like an incubator for,
That's a good way to look at it.
Right. And I think that like, it felt like at Chesapeake for me, even when I was there, which was probably kind of the pinnacle. And then I saw kind of it start to decline a little bit, but it felt like it was all you could eat. Like if you could eat it, you could do it. And there was so much work to go around and so much going on that if you were willing to come in early and work hard, stay late if you had to, do the extra work, there was as much as you could take on. It wasn't like you could get your main job done. Like if your job was to connect wells and negotiate contracts, that's fine. But we were like buying assets, selling assets. We had hundreds of non-ops we were participating in. And like just you could basically learn as much or as little as you wanted to. And there's people that skated by and there's people that did like went above and beyond. And I think that as a young person, it's hard at the time for me to recognize how valuable that was. And you told me too, when I was there, how valuable it was, but I didn't realize it at the time.
Well, I used to tell people at Chesapeake, you don't realize we are part of history right now. The shale revolution is a part of the oil and gas history that you're at the front end of. Who knows where this technology and technology in general is going to take us. But that was a really exciting time, the horizontal drilling, the start of horizontal drilling. And being at Chesapeake, who was at the forefront of that technology, was, it was an amazing thing. And, people have written books about it, about Chesapeake and Aubrey and Tom. And it was really cool to, looking back at the time, I'm thinking, man, I just got to get my job done. I just focus on getting my job done. And it was really cool to be a part of that. And, I got to give Jim Johnson credit as well.
Yeah.
Jim Johnson being my direct boss. He let us run. He just kind of got out of our way and said, that's your baby, run with it. And that's what we did. We did a phenomenal job, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we had a lot to do. There was a ton of work going on. And it went from a period, I got to see a shift while I was there where it went from we're buying everything that we could to then start to sell a lot of things too. And one of the projects we worked on, and I think I've talked about it before, maybe on an episode, but when we had to sell those processing plants that we'd built, and it went from, hey, we're building like 3 processing plants, or really 2 sites, but one of them had the ability to have 2 trains. And then, hey, we got to sell these, and us going to management and saying, we can do this, we can tackle this project. And I think we had like an exclusive with Jeffries, and they're like, well, do you want Jeffries' help? And we were kind of like, not really, because that's going to slow it down. We got to get this done.
Well, Nick said, look, you got a month to sell these 2 assets. If you can't get it done in a month, we're gonna go to Jeffries, or maybe just drop it into Access.
Our affiliate,
So we did it. You remember?
I do. I remember it was like around $600 million for between the 2 assets. I think maybe 580 or 550, maybe 600. But the crazy thing was that on a multiple basis, we hadn't invested that much capital because they were still in process. So they were like projects basically where we had started building it, but we hadn't spent all the money yet. So it was kind of twofold. It was like, hey, we need to raise capital, but we also want to defer capital because we still had a lot of checks to write to get the facilities up and going. And I think if you looked at that deal compared to like a private equity deal, it's hard to sell an asset before it's built on kind of a promise that, hey, it's gonna be this big thing. Now, we did have a lot of volumes that could come on day one, which is, I think, a testament to you guys and what you did with building your own gathering ultimately got dropped into access, but that flexibility that came with having our own gathering systems, because we could have most of the production aggregated to a few points, and it gave us that ability to just move it over to this new project. So we can talk about some of those benefits, but yeah, we basically sold it at this phase in the life cycle where it's hard to sell an asset, and the multiple on what we'd invested was really high. And at the end, they sent us like the wires. Nick sent us like the wires of the transaction coming through. Like, here's a $250 million wire. Here's a $300 million wire. And that was pretty crazy to see. And then afterwards we sat down and we pulled an all-nighter to finish it out. And I remember you telling me, you're like, when I was your age, I wouldn't have got to sniff a deal like this. They wouldn't
have let me in the room.
Yeah.
But
right.
you know that's how Chesapeake operated. It was a breeding ground for smart oil and gas people.
Right.
And you just let people, learn and grow, and it was a great opportunity. I mean, a great opportunity for guys your generation, and for mine, it was phenomenal because I thought, I'll never be in the room to do a deal like that. But here I was in the room, and not only in the room, but driving a lot of the process.
Part of it was like, yes, they wanted to empower people, and we'll give Aubrey that credit and management that credit. But part of it too is there's just so much going on.
Well,
it was like during that deal, I mean, I remember there was a time when one of the midstream companies that was purchasing the asset wanted to have a call with their CEO and chairman of the board of the company. It's a public company. And it was supposed to be like, you, Carlos, I wasn't even going to go to this call. And like the day before, there was some other thing that was more important than that deal that we were working on. It was like maybe the overall drop down with Access, which was like a multi-billion-dollar deal. You guys were trying to get that done. And it was, or whatever it was, I can't remember the exact thing, but it was like, hey, this is really important, but we've got this other thing that's like, management said this is more important. And they're like, can you take this call? And I'm like, it's with the CEO and chairman of the board. And so I called up, I think it was like Bill Messino, one of the asset managers, the guy that was running the business unit, and said, hey, will you come with me on this call? You're the highest ranking person. And he's like, who is it with? And I was like, it's with their CEO and chairman. He's like, okay. You could tell he was like freaked out basically that we had to go and do that. And the call went fine, and he handled it really well because a lot of it was questions about the asset, and I was able to handle the midstream stuff. But we just had so much going on.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that.
It was crazy. Just your role, you had to be, it's so funny because I feel like when I met you at Chesapeake and your reputation, you were kind of a hard ass, right? You had to go in and be the heavy in a lot of these negotiations. I feel like when someone gets to know you, you're kind of a teddy bear in real life. Well, and I feel like you've mellowed out since then.
I have mellowed quite a bit since then.
Yeah.
It was kind of Jim Johnson. Everybody loves Jim. Oh, what a nice guy. What a great guy. It was almost good cop, bad cop. I was the bad cop. And I did it. I played that role well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, because then it became, you're going to have to talk to Mark.
Right.
And so
don't make me bring Mark to this meeting.
Yeah. And my reputation preceded me, unfortunately. Like you say, I think a lot of it was unfounded, but it was a role that I played.
Right.
And that's what Chesapeake wanted me to do. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I have mellowed quite a bit.
Yeah.
Especially coming here and, having to, running your own business with a partner, a business partner, sorry.
Right, yeah.
It humbles you.
Oh yeah.
In a lot of ways. And, it's, if you had told me back in 1990, 2000, even 2010, if you just said, you need to go out and start your own business, I would have said, no way. I'm not doing that.
Right.
Knowing what I know now, I probably would have started much earlier.
Yeah.
It's really been rewarding. The ups and downs are what are, I really enjoy.
Yeah.
Because when we're doing well and everybody at our company's doing well, it's great. Love it. when the industry's, in a downturn and we're not doing so well, it's challenging, and I like the challenges.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not fun, but once you get through those challenges, you look back and you go, man, I wouldn't change a thing. It was great.
Did you basically answered the next question, because I was going to pivot from Chesapeake into the entrepreneurship side. And the question was like, did you ever envision yourself going into the entrepreneurial route? Sounds like that wasn't really on your bingo card in terms of the thought process.
And the way it happened was almost accidental. I got let go from Chesapeake, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was driving home, called my wife and said, hey, they just let me go. What? Why? They said they're going a different direction.
Right.
I asked them what direction that was, and they just said a different one.
Well, to be fair, a couple of things about this. Number one, Chesapeake had how many VPs at one point? You'd made it to like a great role, which is a vice president, but it was also kind of like the kiss of death role at that period of the company. And not when you first got the role, but then over time, because at one point they had a ton of vice presidents.
Yeah.
And whenever we had new management come in, and they had to make changes. Like, we can sit here and cherry pick and do armchair quarterback and talk about the things that maybe new management did wrong. And I think there was plenty of things they did wrong, but I also think that the company at that time needed some change. And one of the first things they did was start letting VPs go.
Right.
And it started out in operations and geology and land, and they didn't make many changes to marketing at first. We kind of made it through about a year or so, or a couple years maybe, where there wasn't a lot of change.
It's interesting. A lot of companies, marketing is almost an afterthought.
Yeah.
And
commercial, really, when people that are listening that don't understand, it's like marketing the product.
Yeah,
Most people
the
probably
commercial role is almost an afterthought. It's like, oh, did anybody tell marketing about this deal?
Yeah.
Oh, no, we better tell them.
Right.
And it took a while for them to get to marketing to let some VPs go, but they did. I was one of the first.
Yeah.
Jim Johnson wouldn't let go. He retired. And I look back and go, man, it was worse. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. But at the time, it felt like the worst.
Well, and one thing I want to give Nick some props, because we've been very lucky as owning a company to not have to let many people go. It's been very rare. It's been a few times, and it's hard. And to have those conversations is difficult. And Nick DeLosso, the new CEO or the current CEO, was a CFO at the time. And the fact that he came and even just talked to you and did it the way that he did was pretty stand-up character.
That I agree. The decision
That's hard to do.
The decision was made, I guess, to let me go, and Nick said, "I want to do it. I want to be the guy that tells him."
Yeah.
And I give him a lot of props for that. And it was a stand-up thing to do.
Yeah.
Nick's a friend of mine, still is a friend of mine.
Right.
But anyway, at the time, it was a gut punch. Wasn't sure what I was going to do. I got home. My wife was working. Got home to an empty house, and I was sitting there going, what am I going to do now? And the phone rang. It was Scott Galentine. Hey, I heard what happened. Can you meet me for coffee? Sure. So I meet Sky, and he said, look, I've got Max working on a project. He's got more than he can say grace over. Can you help him out? I said, sure. Yeah. He said, when can you start? I said, tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I called you the next day and said, hey, Sky wants us to work together on this deal, so let's get together. So we sat down and we talked about how we're going to divide that thing up and knock it out, and that project of Felix's. And we got to work the next day on it.
Yeah, and it was great because at the time I was in a very much period of transition as well, and did not really have the entrepreneurship card in my mind either. It was more out of necessity, and it was a lot of uncertainty because you're kind of like, okay, cool. I got some work. I'm doing some consulting. What's next? What's my future going to be like? It kind of
felt, at least for me, it felt like a stopgap, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do this deal until I can find a job, right? So it took a couple of months before we
incorporated. Yeah.
Well, it's probably more than that.
I mean, actually. I think we were. So the interesting thing was we met. I think we had a beer and hung out and talked and said, "Yeah, let's work together on this." And then it was, well, where are we gonna? We got to have a place to go. I think we went to like a Starbucks or something, maybe once or maybe twice. Yeah. And after the first or second time of trying to go somewhere to work together, it was like, we got to get an office because this isn't going to work.
Right.
Just going to like a public place to try to work on something. But during those initial conversations, and then shortly thereafter, we went and got an office. You had a friend, Luke Curley and Steven, great guys, and have had friendships with them and still do business like with Steven today, do a lot of things with them. But they were, had a building and said, hey, there's some empty space. Talk to this tenant here. They can sublease to you. Got a really cheap cubicle. We sat in it was a nice cubicle.
We shared a cubicle.
Yeah, shared basically a cubicle. And then we did a lot of like what I would call like scheming and dreaming. It was like, what's the next thing that we can do? And we had talked to a number of different potential clients, and it was like, well, hey, you had a lot of connections. I was trying to talk to people, and it was a lot easier to pitch people when you had a team and when you had more of like a plan, right? It's like you could put a PowerPoint together and say, here's our background, here's what we're doing, can we help you out? And it did not feel like it was going to be I feel like I joke around, it's like we had a company before we knew we had a company type of thing.
We did.
Because it was, one or two clients later where we got to a point where it was like, all right, we're at 3, maybe 4 clients. And a lot of just networking. To talk about that process, it was a lot of like, your network, and it was reaching out. It wasn't cold calling. It was, we were fortunate, like we mentioned earlier, to have all these people that we knew that went on to do great things like Sky.
Right.
And then we started seeing these people and calling on them and saying, can we help you? And they knew us because they saw the good work that we did back when we were working together at a previous company. And so a couple of those early deals that we landed were just through relationships. And even to this day, a lot of deals are relationship based. And so we kind of cobbled together a couple clients, and it was like, we got to stop billing like separately. It was like at first, the first one we were billing separately. And then I think it wasn't much longer after that we just did like one billing. I think we set up a bank account, and then it was like set up an LLC.
Yeah. We started with Felix, and then we got Payrock, if you recall.
Right. Yeah.
And it was in the same basin. So we were a little nervous about that.
Yeah.
So we called Scott and said, hey, Payrock wants us to work for him. He said, don't do it. No.
Yeah.
He said, I said, well, we're calling because we want to make sure you're aware and want to get your approval.
Right.
I don't approve.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember calling you going, he's not going to let us do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're like, oh, well, okay, well, we'll just keep plugging away. The next day, called back and said, I thought about it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Just don't, we have a CA. Don't tell them anything about my deal. Oh, of course not. No, we can't do that. Right. We're not going to do that.
I think there's some credit there, too, to our network. I feel like maybe he talked to somebody like Carlos, or someone talked to him. I can't remember. I feel like someone stood up for us and was like, those guys could probably work both of these clients. It's not that big of a deal. But then that's something we struggle with today. There's always like the potential for people. We have to keep confidentiality so serious at our company. It's like the most serious thing.
It is the most serious thing that we deal with. We cannot violate confidentiality.
Right.
You get the opportunity to do that once, and then you'll never your company will fold.
Right.
You're done.
For sure. And so that was a learning thing then, which ended up being a theme that we've had to navigate before, because we've done a bunch of different things. Even when we dabbled in midstream, there was always like the potential conflict thing that we've had to navigate. But so it went from like 2 to 3 to 4. And I think we incorporated around, or had an LLC together around the end of 14. Technically, when we put it in place, maybe we didn't file it till the beginning of 15, but we were basically doing the work starting in like the fall or late summer of 14, basically, and working together. And then it became, how do you scale? It's just such a tough question. That's been like one of the harder business challenges that I've had to deal with in any business.
Yeah, we still wrestle with it. And I don't think we'll ever solve that. It's always going to be, chasing that brass ring of scaling the business. Because the next phone call we get, we might have to go hire 4 people.
Right.
Or
you always want to say yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Or we might have to let 4 people go.
Right.
Now, I'm exaggerating, obviously, because we try not to do that, and we've gone through some tough times.
Right.
And been able to not let too many people go from a layoff perspective. We've made some hiring mistakes.
Yeah, for sure.
But everybody does that. But it's been like you say, the biggest challenge that we've faced is how do we scale? But I think we're getting there. We understand it better now.
Yeah.
We have we've got some, wiggle room, if you will. We've been able to hire some folks on contract and then bring them in as full-time employees later, or some people just want to stay on contract and work on their own schedule, which is fine.
Right.
And that's where the wiggle room is.
Right.
But
yeah, it's like I would equate scaling to like spending, you've got $2 and you just made $2. You've been making $1 forever, and now you're finally making $2, but now you got to go make it back to making $1 again to hope you make $3. Right. It's like you have to invest in yourself.
It's
and
like
in the
I
business.
say, sometimes you got to shrink to grow. And what I mean by that is sometimes you got to shrink your balance sheet to grow.
Yeah.
And we've done that on several occasions, and probably going through some of that now because of pricing.
Right. Yeah, it's always hard. And it's always like when you think you need to hire someone, it's probably you do. Or maybe it's too late, right? Yeah. You probably already should have. And then it was like the evolution. So it started out, we're mainly just doing consulting. And then it was clients requesting that we actually physically sell the product and market the product, which you had a lot of reservations about. I feel like there's been a lot of times, and we'll get into some of the different ventures that we've done, where I'm kind of like, we need to do this, pushing. And you're like, hey, this is hard. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's difficult. Here's all the reasons why it's difficult. And I'm like, yeah, but there's an opportunity here. And so we're able to start getting into the physical marketing space. And without going into the details, had some challenges there. There's been a lot of ups and downs. Like the other day, we were talking about ups and downs, and I was, went back home afterwards, and you'd mentioned, hey, we've been through a lot of ups and downs. And I thought, I'm going to write down all the times when I felt like things were down. And there's been some times when I thought like things were really down. I mean, even that beginning story, like I didn't have a ton of money in my bank account. I was a young person, 27 years old. It wasn't like I was sitting on some huge nest egg, and I had just had a kid. And so I was very stressed. And like the other thing too was for the first couple of years, yeah, maybe we had a few contract employees or one or two full-time people, but it still didn't feel like it had coalesced into like a truly sustainable thing. I mean, it was always very like by a thread. There's been a lot of times where it's felt like it's by a thread. In retrospect, you look at it and you're like, it was fine. But at the time, it felt very much like, can we coalesce this and grow it? And have done some partnerships in the past where we felt like we didn't make the right. It gets back to picking the people that are around you. Right. Surround yourself sometimes with the wrong people, and you're like, this is a mistake. And I mean, there's been some dark times. It's not like it's all, I think from the outside looking in, there's a lot of mystique around being like an entrepreneur. But when you're in it, it's very gritty, and it's very like, this sucks sometimes.
Yeah, Yeah, and won't go into some of the mistakes we made, but we made some. I wouldn't say mistakes. We found some partners that weren't what we thought they were.
Right. Just hard lessons, basically.
Hard lessons.
Yeah.
And you learn from that. And I'm a little different than you, and I think the yin and yang that we have is probably helped us in a lot of occasions. Yeah. That I'm more of a need to take a step back and let's analyze, let's think about this, let's pray about this. And you're more of a, let's dive right in. We got to do this now.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes you're right, sometimes I'm right, but for the most part, our thought processes end up meshing well.
Yeah. And you learn too. I mean, I think I've come more your way in terms of being more cautious on things because I've seen how things can go the way you didn't think that they were going to go. I mean, sometimes you just, there's been a lot of lessons. I mean, one of the things is like around a contract and what you think, in terms of having an agreement with someone or thinking you have a deal and then realizing a contract's not really worth anything unless you're willing to like litigate it if that partner doesn't do the thing that you want them to do. There's been times where we have contracts in place and there's a huge downturn and clients come back to you and ask you to break those contracts. And it's like, well, this has been a good client to us, but do we want to, so there's just times where you learn these lessons and you're like, nothing's really a given. Yeah, you got to take it as it comes.
The partnerships and the contract, the best contracts are the ones you never get off the shelf.
Yeah.
That if you have something if you have a conflict, you call the other party and you work it out.
Yeah.
And you never have to pull that contract down and read it. And those are the kind of deals that I like. If somebody calls and says, hey, we're going through some tough times, can you reduce our fees? One of our customers calls, absolutely, we'll help you out. And then there's times when we call them up and go, hey, can you help us out? We haven't increased your fees in 4 years.
Right.
Sure, yeah, okay, I understand. So, those are the kind of partners and business partners you want, is the ones that listen and understand what you're going through.
Sure. So with the new marketing business, that helped us a lot from a scaling standpoint. And there was a rough start early on just because of some of the things. We won't get into the details, but it was a lot to get off the ground, because I think the big thing there was we did have to hire more staff. We had to add resources, and that created more of a burn rate, which creates, more overhead, more pressure to grow the business. But it's a business that's been able to really help us scale. And that's been a positive, because there are some economies of scale with doing it. You can make the consulting side is very high touch. You got to have bodies for the most part. And the marketing's helped us scale. And so it did well for a couple of years and started growing. And then we had the opportunity to get more into the asset side of the business, which again was something I was very focused on in my thesis. Has been, and to this day, I still like the idea of assets, and some of that's what we're doing with real estate. It's like we've got hard assets that we actually own something, but at the time it was a service business only, and so we got the opportunity to raise some capital, and it kind of came to us. We didn't push it too hard, but that was another big sort of leap of faith moment where it's like we're pivoting into a totally different thing, and again, it was a challenge. We had like a commitment on that. We had a partner that left us at the altar, and we still got the deal done. So again, comes to partnerships, and like another time where it was like we had somebody we thought we could, rely on, and then it didn't work out. And then we got that deal, and then we had to hire people. And man, that was talk about the struggles of when we went, and it was a midstream commitment, but just from 2018 to 2021, just what you learned and all the things that we went through in terms of our evolution there and the growth.
Oh, I learned a lot. Became a really good tire kicker, if you will.
Yeah. Right.
We looked at a ton of deals.
I think like 50 or 60 deals when we put it all together at the end to do like what we evaluated and what we bid on.
Some really good deals and most really not good deals. Right. And our timing was just about as bad as it could have been getting into the midstream business at that point in time.
Yeah. Bad or good. I mean, we could have got a deal. Had we got in it maybe a year or two earlier, we may have got something done that was bigger, but it would have not turned out very well.
Yeah, you're right about that. But we learned a lot. Screening deals is what we probably got really, really good at. Underwriting
deals is a skill set.
It is.
And it's one thing to be kind of a part of the team. Like I think on our bios, we say that we've been a part of X amount of billions of dollars of deals and transactions. And a lot of those, we were just a team member. We were like, hey, you're handling the commercial piece of this, or you're handling the due diligence side for your niche. But it's different when you're like the CEO or whatever, the leader of the deal team, and you're actually going to have to underwrite it from start to finish, think about operations, think about the financial side, and then think about putting your own money in it and the risk that you're taking.
And what's interesting is we had two other really good partners on our midstream team, Jason Fournier and Danny Craig. And we all had a voice.
Yeah.
And sometimes a voice would speak up and go, I don't want to do this deal. And three other guys are attacking him going, why not? Why not? Why not?
Right.
And in the end, he's probably right.
Yeah.
So and that's the other thing. I learned quite a bit about during all of our, going on 9 years or 10 years of this, listen to your partner.
Right.
And know your partner.
Right.
That's the other thing. And, I don't think that, I think every one of the four of us, at least at some point in time, was singled out, was the lone voice saying,
Sure.
I don't want to do this deal.
Right.
Sometimes, I know that you guys talked me off the ledge a couple of times.
Sure.
And so, it's just having good partnerships is key to any entrepreneurial venture.
It's leverage. And I think the other thing that's key to entrepreneurial stuff is being able to pivot, being able to evolve. I mean, we've already talked about it with our stuff. It was like we've evolved a couple times. So that's like 3 evolutions in the span of 4 or 5 years. And each time there was a bunch of personal growth. There was also economic benefit that came with it. But even within that midstream pursuit that we had, how many times did it change what our thesis was? Because there was like this playbook that worked for private equity midstream that we kind of raised the money or thought about raising the money on. And then like shortly into it, the playbook started to rapidly change and really deteriorate. It wasn't like it wasn't going to work. Like what everybody had been doing for the last 8 years and had a ton of success, we kind of quickly realized this isn't working. Like the deals we saw getting done were like, these deals aren't going to be that successful. They're spending a ton of capital. They don't have good fees. People are paying
How
for
are they
dedication.
making that deal work?
Yeah, how are they making money, basically?
We asked that a number of times. And, we did pivot. We looked at carbon capture deals. And I'm still foggy on how people are making money doing
no one's really doing that many of them. But
and then we started looking at compression companies and running fleets of compressors and found one that we almost put a bid in on and just kind of it just didn't really look like the kind of returns we wanted, so we backed out. Then we found another one that we thought, man, this is a great opportunity, and our funding source kind of bailed on us.
Yeah.
So, but it was, again, to your point, we had to pivot out of necessity, and that's the thing we got really, really good at is pivoting and finding deals to screen.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, none of them really came to fruition, and we parted ways with our funding source amicably. We were pleased with them. I think they were pleased with us. So
we still have good relationships with a bunch of people that are still there and that have left. And I think some of those relationships will be very fruitful because we're talking about future opportunities with some of the people that we worked with at that time. So I think it was good and amicable. But like, think about some of the pivots. It was like joint ventures, kind of greenfield stuff.
Partner with the
producer to build a system, which we did a small asset and then sold that one. And so it wasn't, we didn't get anything done. We did some, and that could have been probably a $40 or $50 million deal, but it just didn't pan out. And then we looked at like acquisitions for a long time. It was like, hey, enough of the greenfield stuff. Let's look at acquisitions. Did that. A lot of reasons why those weren't working at the time. We looked at the facilities stuff. Then we pivoted to more like, let's look at the Permian and we'll do like field level gathering compression. Then it was like, well, what about facilities? There's a bunch of capital being spent there. So it was like within the span of, and then from that it was, hey, why don't you guys look at more energy transition stuff? So, or oil field services. And so it was like, we were sitting here evaluating not just a lot of deals, but a lot of different types of deals. And then, even things like drillcos and like, putting money in upstream. We looked at upstream deals.
What we were calling pipecos, if you recall.
Right. Yeah. Looked at like investing in the upstream side, so underwriting those deals. We looked at, pivoted from that to the green side and oil field services. So looked at a bunch of OFS deals, compression, carbon capture. And then we did, looked at Bitcoin, started getting into Bitcoin deals. Yeah. And was like evaluating that. It was like, well, what's making money? What's a new innovative technology in the oil field?
You kind of got started on the Bitcoin, going down the Bitcoin path, and I was very reluctant to do that. And then I realized, look, if converting natural gas to Bitcoin is a real deal, I want to be on the front end of that.
Sure.
And we were smart enough not to pour a ton of money into that. But we did it.
Yeah. And we learned it. I
mean, we learned it. And if it ever does become a real deal, and it is, I mean, it's a real deal. I mean, we haven't lost money on that deal yet.
Yeah. And it's the real deal. It's just like, it's a hyper volatile industry as well. Talk about high CapEx, volatile commodity. There's some advantages because you can do it anywhere. I think that in the Bitcoin side, what we've learned is that, alternative revenue streams are really critical. Like if you can own an asset that's not just Bitcoin, if you can make some money on oil or money on gas sales or money on liquids, if you can find truly stranded stuff, I mean, it's always going to be a technology. It's just a hyper competitive because the hash rate's always going up. It's hyper volatile and CapEx intensive.
Right.
Not a lot of good capital for that space.
Right.
Really poor capital, predatory debt.
Right.
It's a challenge. I'd love to do more of it and need to.
Well, I think we can. I think we keep that door open. I think timing is critical on when you get in and when you get out.
Right.
But I think the little Bitcoin mine we've got is going to be there a while.
Yeah, for sure.
And we'll be able to just kind of ride that pony until a bigger deal comes up.
Sure.
Yeah, so
it was crazy. Like that whole industry too, talk about learning a new thing. I mean, it's like having to evaluate different things. And that was really at a time kind of around 2020. And where my head was at was technology. We got to be investing in ourselves and learning new technology. So it was like doing the Bitcoin stuff, doing the media stuff, getting outside of our comfort zone there.
We learned a lot.
Doing the Ancova View, what ultimately became that. That was something that, the software that we have now.
Right.
That all was around that time frame where we were like leaning into being like, we got to be technology forward.
Right.
Which again, we weren't using much technology at all. And that's what hit me was like, I was like, looked at our business. I was like, we're really not using technology that much. We're not really that technology forward.
It's interesting how that all came about. It's been in process for 4 years, 5 years?
3 or 4 years, I think.
Where, and it kind of started when, I went to John and said, hey, can you put contracts in a database that we can all pull up and look at, and instead of having to go pull a hard copy.
Or just like a file saved somewhere.
Or a file saved in my, instead of me having to search through all my files, can I just go in and pull it up by well name? Sure, right. Yeah. So we put something together. And from that, you started talking about, well, we've got the contract files and we've got all the statements from our customers.
We have a tremendous amount of data. So we have tons of data, text data, PDFs,
so
Excel spreadsheets.
Can we get the contracts and the revenue data talking back and forth to make sure that we're getting paid correctly? Because prior to all that, we would have to pull a processing statement, pull out a contract, and make sure that our customers are getting paid properly. And it was just a time in consuming process.
Right.
And so now we've got this product that I'm amazed because of the years I've been in this business, to be able to do what we're doing is something I would have loved to have had at Chesapeake, JMA, Finley Energy, Delhi, every company I was at, that I don't have to pull up the contract. I can look at a dashboard to see if I'm being paid correctly. And if I'm not, that's when I pull the contract out and say, okay, you're not paying me correctly. Here's the language. Here's what you paid me. Let's fix this.
Yeah. Well, and I would have never, talking about changing and evolving, I would have not said we're going to be a software business or we'd have a software business. A couple years ago, it was more just like, how do we make our life easier? How do we solve problems that we have? And I think that in that business,
that kind of goes back to hiring smart people.
Right.
Yeah.
Talk about our team here is great. We're very blessed to have amazing people around us.
And Annalee McMillan, who's kind of a driving force behind View.
And John, yeah.
And John are just the two, I keep telling them, this is your baby.
Right.
You got to feed it and love it. And and they've done a great job at putting it. We just go and say, can we make it do this? Yeah, I think so. Let's give it a shot.
Right.
And 2 weeks later, they're making it do whatever we ask them to do.
And I think like that business, what's been the most validating and rewarding thing is to seeing it hasn't, we don't have that many people signed up as a standalone client for that. I think we just got one this week signed up that's truly like a View client and not
it's only a View client.
Only a View client, right? Everybody else is kind of a hybrid. It's like we've guinea pigged it on a lot of our clients and they've enjoyed it. But then what's really been the most rewarding is seeing people that were pitching this as a standalone software and seeing them light up and be like, this is incredible. This is great. I wish I had this, or this is awesome. And it may not fit every company that we pitched it to for whatever reasons that they have, but there are a few that we're working on right now that I think it would fit them amazing. And I think that they'll sign up for the service and in the product, but that's been massively validating and feels really good because it's like, you have something back to the scheming and dreaming. You think about something, you have a plan, you believe it creates value, and then to see other people validate that it would create value for them is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I haven't heard of anybody we've shown it to that said, man, this is amazing. This is awesome.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's selling itself.
Yeah, for sure. And it just gets back to that evolution. And so, into the future, people always ask, I've got this question asked me before. It's like, well, what are your hopes and what do you want to be in 5 years? And I think my 5 years is probably different than your 5 years. But like, where do you see things going into the future? What's like a success case for you about what we're doing now?
Well, I think a success case for me is I don't dream of being mega wealthy. I really don't. I think it's being able to provide good service to good customers and be able to at some point in time, I'm going to want to slow down or maybe even retire altogether. I've got a 10-year-old, so that's going to be a while.
Yeah.
But I just want to ride out my career by providing good service. People will remember me as somebody that he might have been tough, but he was damn sure fair. And that's how I want to be remembered in this business.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been a crazy journey, and I'm very thankful and grateful that we did this because I don't know where my career path would have gone had it not been this direction. And I'm happy to have had you as a mentor and almost like a father figure. And it's also the people that you've brought, like David Kerrigan's another person that we haven't mentioned, but someone that was here for a long time.
I just talked to him before this.
Yeah, guys that we've had to, and I met him through Chesapeake and through you, but just I feel very lucky to be able to be and have been on the path that we're on.
Yeah, you mentioned Kerrigan, the best mentor in the business ever. I mean, he would take somebody young, put him under his wing, and teach him, and he was the best in the business.
Right.
He's like a brother. Love that guy. But what you and I have done has been one of the most fulfilling things I've ever experienced being in this business, and growing from a 2-man cubicle to what we've grown to. And I think we've got even greater growth ahead of us. We'll survive the ups and downs of this business. It's just the nature of the beast, and we haven't figured out how to do it. We've figured out how to survive it, and I think we'll continue to do that. And we, just keep hiring good, smart people up here, and we're going to be fine.
Yeah, we're trying to solve problems.
Right.
Keep trying to solve problems and evolve and roll with the punches.
Right.
But no, I think it's been part luck and part the position we've put ourselves into. I always like to try to credit some luck because there's been times when you think back and you say, man, I was really lucky that happened.
And I feel lucky that I feel blessed that you and I were put together to go down this path together. It hasn't always been easy. There's been times I wanted to wring your neck, like a father wants to wring his kid's neck sometimes. But it's been rewarding, and I really enjoyed watching you evolve to where you are. And again, I hope I haven't been too much of governor on your growth.
I don't think so.
I'm fortunate and lucky to be your partner.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's I think there's something that when you get older, there's like a wisdom aspect to life that you can't really learn from a book or a YouTube video or something. And what you learn is that what I've learned is that I've been very fortunate to have the situation and to have good partners and good people around you, because not everything we've pursued has worked.
No.
And things we're still trying to pursue today that I don't know if it's going to work. And I worry about it. So when you look back at the successes you have had, you're like, man, that was really special. And at the time, maybe you didn't feel like it was that special because you're just trying to survive or trying to make it through it. But it's only in that hindsight lens that you're like, wow, that was.
I really don't think you can succeed unless you've failed in the past.
Right.
And we've had our failures, but we've had our successes. So
for sure,
we'll keep going down that path.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you did this, because I think that I've been trying to get you to come on this for a couple of years. The podcast thing was something, again, where you're like, you're doing what? You're starting what? What's going on? The value of networking, and I think having these conversations, and it's kind of like a time capsule for me. It's like, I don't know, the people will find this conversation interesting. I hope that they do, but I surely will find it just something that I'm glad that we did. And I've done them with like my dad and other people, and I look back at that even now, I'm like, that's awesome. I'm glad we did it. So hope it's not the last time we sit down and do it. We should make this more regular.
Again, I don't like seeing myself, so I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah.
I might listen.
Yeah.
Doing a podcast for me it's like pulling teeth. It's like going to the dentist. You dread doing it, but once it's over, you're glad you did it.
Yeah,
so
you'll be happy with it.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah,
and I appreciate it. And maybe we'll get on and talk about whiskey and.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. We should just get on and talk more about the nuts and bolts. This wasn't an ad for Ancova, but we can make some stuff that's Ancova content, and we will, that I think that there's a lot more knowledge you can share. Yeah. But for the next time. All right. Thanks, guys.